Collision theory is the key to rate. Look at that first line. If you're going to get a reaction, your particles have to collide. And then there's a second thing. They must collide. Must collide. Clearly an important thing. If they don't actually collide with each other, there's no chance of a collision, no chance of a reaction. And then sometimes they'll just bounce off each other. So they have to collide with the right orientation quite frequently. So as an example underneath there of a reaction where the reactants have to be colliding in the right orientation. So you might put that in a description to get a favorable reaction, a successful collision. They've first of all got to collide. They might have to have the right orientation, and there might have to be sufficient force. Not enough force, you won't have enough energy to overcome that activation energy barrier that we were talking about way back in a couple of days ago when we were talking about the energy profiles and the activation energy as being an indication of how much energy you need to put in to break the bonds. They could just collide slowly and they won't have enough energy to break any bonds, so they just bounce off again. Collide with more force, and then there's more collision energy, there's more chance that bonds will break. You get that intermediate stage, and then bonds can form, and down the hill we go, and we get some new products as new bonds form. So getting the wording right is the key thing. So we are going to be talking about successful collisions. That's a key word in any of your answers. The chief assessor, when he did his exam reports, often used to use the word fruitful. So we often used to talk about fruitful collisions. So successful, if you like fruitful. I don't think that's quite as obvious, but may mean something. Fruitful meaning a successful collision, a fruitful collision, a collision that results in products. So obviously only successful collisions result in a reaction. Now let's get the wording really right. Spending a bit of time here, this is important. I'm going to say use the F word, and I'm not being rude. F in chemistry is going to stand for frequency. You're going to use that word as often as possible, because I would say you don't have to do this. It won't be necessarily worth a mark, but it sets up your answer. It should be common sense that the rate of reaction is proportional to, and I would say, oh, this question is about rate. I would slap this down as your first dot point. Rate of reaction is proportional to the frequency of successful collisions. Write that down and drill it. Make sure that makes sense. The more frequent your successful collisions are, the faster the rate of reaction. Frequency, that F word. Throw in frequency as often as possible. Lots of students just say, oh, if I get more collisions, I'll get a faster rate. I'm sorry, more collisions is not accepted by VCAA as indication. I could have 1 million collisions. And you might think, oh, that's a lot of collisions. But if it's happening over 1 million years, that's 1 collision per year. There has to be a time factor in your explanation. So you can say number of collisions, number of successful collisions per unit time. See where I bring the time factor in? But that is clumsy. Lots of you will forget to say per unit time, and you'll just say, oh, I get more successful collisions. No time factor, you won't get the mark for that. If you use the F word, then that includes the time factor. It's saying you're getting more successful collisions in a given period of time. It's more frequent successful collisions. I hope I'm making absolute clear, because this is nearly always asked on VCAA exams. They've got a test rate somewhere. They often have an explain type question. And do many students get full marks? Nope, only the really well-trained one. So I'm going to start training you right now. That is a really good first dot point. Oh, questions about rate. I'll just slap that down so that it guides my thinking. How could I make the rate faster? How can I increase the frequency of my successful collisions? That's what we're going to be focusing on. And therefore, I'd prefer that that third dot point actually says the more frequently these successful collisions occur. I don't think we need the per unit time. If we'd said the more number of successful collisions per unit time, that would be okay. But frequency includes that per unit time. So let's take that out. Let's keep it simpler. Nobody would argue. It just is rather odd English to put in per unit time there. As long as you've got that F word in there, you're on the hunt for full marks for this question. But if you're not thinking, how can I increase the frequency of successful collisions, then you're not going to be answering the question properly.